Welcome and thank you for joining in to listen another episode of Golden Llama Show. It's so great to have you listening. Today we have Vicky Midwood with us, who's a health coach. What's up, Vicky?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm amazing. I wake up early. I did a run. I bought a lime juice, which was really bad. Anyway, what's your story?
Well, I am, as you said, a health coach, but I'm also the addiction eliminator. And that doesn't mean I eliminate everybody's addiction. It means I help people get rid of the reasons that they think they need to turn to food or to drink or to over exercising or other things that distracts them,
Mm.
help them to feel better. And I do that because that was my story and I couldn't find the answers or struggled to find all of the answers. And I recognize that it's never just one thing.
I literally just pictured myself with a gun, you eliminating those with addictions. But jokes aside, I gotta tell you, I love that part overworking. That was me back in the day. And I used to overwork a lot. I realized that this is a coping mechanism that I use to challenge the reality. And
Yeah.
I used to force myself. I used to punish myself in the gym. But I realized that this is something that's actually blocking me, and I was able to let go and use that energy to propel me in the future. What about you?
Well, this is where it's interesting that you recognize that you were punishing yourself because a lot of people are not able to recognize that for themselves. And they think that what they're doing is a way to help them to feel better. And so they don't see it as being necessarily harmful until they recognize that they're getting physical symptoms or they're getting illnesses or gut problems or migraines or backache. And it's often the physical issues that are the things that prompt them to look at what am I doing that is causing me to feel this way? And as you said, it's you shifted your energy and you recognize that it was punishment. But for many people, they just don't know that that is what it is.
So, let's say if someone is listening to this, and that might be a tricky question, but Vicky, you're totally nuts. Going to the gym is healthy. How can you say that? How would you respond to that?
I would say, what, first of all, thank you for sharing your opinion with me. Then, Kinsley, I would say, what do you mean by healthy? Because what does it mean? It's different for everybody. And
Look at
this
those
is
guns, baby. I'm so swole.
right. So, do you mean buff? Do you mean you look fit? Or do you use the word healthy to mean I've got a well rounded approach to life? Does it mean that you are able to lift things, move things, do what you want, when you want, with who you want? What do you mean by healthy? Because unless you know that, keep your opinion to yourself.
I can't scratch my back because I'm so big.
Right. So just because you're big and bulky and have a lot of muscle, does that necessarily mean you're healthy? No, often it doesn't, because what's going on in your head? What is your mindset saying about the way that you look? Do you know why you want to be big and bulky? What do you believe that that is going to give you? And that,
Impress
so,
the lady.
right. Okay. To
Obviously.
impress the ladies. Right. And so the question is, so let's say that you have impressed the ladies, then what?
I haven't yet impressed the lady. And I'll tell you a funny story. Most of the guys that go to the gym actually do that to impress the ladies and they impress other guys. But I want to pivot a bit just to build some foundation for this conversation. How do you define health?
Yeah. So for me, health means feeling good in who you are being, as well as how you look and how you live.
What about those people that like themselves when they're drunk?
I think when it comes to a culture that we have, like whether it's an overworking culture or whether it's like in the UK and in Australia and New Zealand, where they kind of have similar thoughts about drinking, and it's it's a badge of honor if you can drink everybody under the table and still stay standing and then get up for work having had no sleep whatsoever, or maybe an hour. And somehow that is like a badge of honor. And this is where we've got to look at, what is the culture that you're coming from and what is that allowing you to do or not to do? And how does it make you feel in and of yourself? Because a lot of people fall into this stuff because it's peer pressure, because everybody else is doing it, but they're not actually enjoying it and it doesn't make them feel good. And if you don't feel good and you look into the mirror and you're not really happy with what you see, then that's going to affect how you interact with other people, but also how you speak to yourself about yourself in your own head. And this is the stuff that people don't recognize is having a physiological effect on their whole body and how their brain is functioning, as well as how their body is functioning.
What about if they do realize that, for example, their internal voice is like, oh my God, you shouldn't drink. Why do you do those things just to impress people? But
Mm.
people take this voice and just throw it into the backseat or just in the trunk, lock it and ignore it. What about those people?
Well, for those people, then they're not ready to do anything about it. Yeah, and you can't make somebody want to change or be different, because if they don't want to hear what that voice is saying, then they're not going to. And you're not going to persuade them to. And I'm certainly not. I'm in the job and the world of helping people to help themselves when they recognize that they're ready to be helped.
So how can one recognize?
Usually it's about you feeling or saying to yourself, oh my God, I don't want to spend another day feeling like this. Or you're promising yourself every morning that I'm never going to do that again. Right. And you end up doing it again and realizing that it's not making you happy.
Hmm.
And
Are
usually
you
it's a feeling. It's a feeling of not being happy, of not being content, of not being comfortable, and often of not being able to do the stuff that you actually want to do because you feel so rubbish in your own body.
Are you speaking from your own experience? And if so, what was the thing that was blocking you?
Yeah, so definitely from my own experience. So my experience was having issues with food when I was very young, and also alcohol, but I didn't really realize it back then. So for me, it was I wanted to change my body size and shape because I thought then everything would magically be okay. And that wasn't the reality, because it didn't matter how thin I got, everything was still not okay. And this is where you realize that what your brain is telling you to do is not actually what you need to be doing. And looking at the external stuff wasn't the answer for me. When I switched my obsession with food to drinking, because in my head seemed a really sensible thing to do. I didn't like the feeling of food inside of me.
Mhm.
But if you drink, well, there's lots of calories in alcohol. So I'm getting enough energy to function and I don't have to feel full. So I'm not uncomfortable and there's no food involved. So that seemed like a really good idea to swap one for the other. And so this is where it's the stories in your head. I didn't realize I had a problem. I really genuinely believed I was in control. And that's where the delusional state comes
Mhm.
in, because we do. And especially if everybody around us is doing similar things. If they're smoking and if they're drinking, and you're in a culture where it is the norm to go out after work and get hammered and then have little sleep and go back into work and work like a lunatic, stupid hours the next day and repeat it, you're going to go along and do it. And you're not going to stop and question, have I got a block? What's stopping me from doing this? You don't know what you don't know. And I certainly didn't
So,
know.
so tell me, was it a good idea in the end that you used first food as a coping mechanism and then use alcohol? Was it a good idea?
I think nobody asks themselves that question at the time. In hindsight, it wasn't, but I didn't have an alternative. I didn't know that there was an alternative. At 5 or 6 years old, when you're not feeling safe or comforted or in your own environment, you're just not knowing who you are, where you fit, what is going on. You're not going to stop and question, is this a good idea to eat multiple bars of chocolate? You're just going to do it without any thought process behind it, particularly because you're getting some kind of feeling and just a time where you don't actually have to necessarily think about anything else.
So
And
what
this
was
is
the last?
nobody sets out to be addicted, right? And nobody just goes, "Oh, I know. I think I'd really love to be an alcoholic. I'd really love to be addicted to sugar and white flour and fast food." No, nobody sits and says that. They end up falling into a pattern and a behavior because when we understand how the brain works, and I didn't until I went into rehab, and then thankfully, while I was in there, spoke to a really interesting therapist who lit up a fire in me to discover how the brain actually works and understand what addiction actually is. And it was nothing to do with willpower, and it's nothing to do with any of the stuff that you think it is. But when you don't know what is going on, you turn to something that makes you feel better. And if you have something, whatever that thing is, and you feel better, your brain remembers. Your brain is always trying to be helpful. So it logs it and it goes, do you know what? When you ate 2 chocolate bars, you felt calm, you felt safe, you felt within that moment, okay. So do that again. When you feel uncomfortable, when you don't feel safe, I'm going to remind you to do that thing because then you're going to feel better. And when you understand that that is what's going on neurologically, chemically, yeah, your brain is trying to help you to feel safe because ultimately your brain's got one thing to do, stop you from dying, right? Safety equals you're not going to die. Anything makes you unsafe, that's a threat. You could die. Yeah. So this is where you've got to recognize your brain's only ever trying to be helpful. So it's going to tell you to go do that thing because it works. And that's the thing. It does work. Doesn't work long term, but it does work short term. And your brain's going to remind you of that. So when you try and stop doing it, it feels like there's a fight going on.
So was this a habit that was triggered by emotional response?
Absolutely. But you don't necessarily know it at the time. Ultimately, as kids, how do you want to feel? Nurtured, safe. Yeah. You want to feel that you're going to be looked after. You want to feel that you kind of know what to expect. So if you're living in a chaotic environment, if you don't know if somebody's going to praise you one minute and blow up at you the next minute, if you don't know whether your parents are going to stay together or not stay together, or whatever people's circumstances happens to be, then as a child, you don't feel safe. And you're going to try and seek out something that is going to help you to feel safe and calm and comforted. Because otherwise, your brain thinks you're going to die. If you're always in a state of red alert, if you're always switched on, if you're always ready to run away because there's danger all around you, that's exhausting and your brain can't hack it. So it's going to help you to look for something to make you feel better. And in my case, what was the thing that was always available to me freely and easily? Food. So that was the thing that I turned to because it was easy.
Now, I have a question, and as always, it's very tricky. What's more important, thought or emotion?
No, I don't do either or. And you can't say what's more important, right? Because they are two things that work together. You can't separate them. It's just impossible. It's like you saying to me, what's more important, mental health or physical health? No, it's just health, right? Because last time I looked, you've got a head and it's within your body and your brain's in that head and it's attached. You can't separate them. So thoughts and feelings go together. And so one isn't more important than the other because they both trigger each other.
So, how do we use both thoughts and emotions to our advantage and not allow thoughts and emotion to use us?
Really good question. Love that question. First of all, ask yourself, do you even know what your thoughts are? Because most people don't. Most people do not know what they are thinking. Most people don't necessarily know what they are feeling. They can feel a sensation in their body oftentimes, but they may not actually know what does that actually mean for me. So the very first question is, are you even aware? Are you even aware of what the thoughts are and the feelings are? And what is the association then that you have with that feeling and with that thought? Once you've got some idea of awareness, that's when you can decide, okay, is that thought true? Is this feeling something that I can actually manage to sit with, to work through? Yes. If the thought is true, I'm just going to have to sit with it and know that it will just pass. If I just recognize it is just a feeling and it's just energy in motion, that's all emotions are. And it will just move on if I allow it to. If it's not true, what do I need to be thinking instead so that I can then feel a different way? But you've got to actually start with that first step. And that's often the step that people don't want to do or don't even know is the first step. You've got to know what you're thinking. Majority of people walk around having no clue about what they're thinking, right? They know they feel uncomfortable. They know we all do it, don't you? You go into a room and sometimes you kind of get a vibe from certain people, but you can't necessarily put that into words. Where you just kind of go, I don't actually want to be in that person's space. There's just something that feels a bit off. And either people will take action and they'll extricate themselves from that environment, or they'll force themselves to stay there because I should, I have to, I ought to. And they're not recognizing that what is going on, what is the thought process, and what is the feeling, what's going on in their body. And this is where you've got to know, right? About knowing yourself. Who are you? Who are you being? What are you feeling? What are you thinking? Because until you know that, you can't change it. That's the stuff that unless you've got somebody asking you the right question, it's quite a challenge to try and work through on your own.
I always say that awareness is like driving a car. If you're not looking left, if you're not looking right, if you're not looking what behind you
Yeah,
or in the front, you're on your phone eating pizza and what the hell just happened? How the hell did I end up in the lake? That's not
dead right.
possible.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
what she said about when you enter a room and there is a person, that there is a vibe that is different, that you either can act or you either give a person this benefit of a doubt. There's
mm,
a third option, the Llama way, which is observe why is that person triggering you? Can you allow that emotion to go through you so there is no need for reaction and you can really grow through this situation? Because that person most likely is for a reason in your life. And just don't be a snowflake and allow those emotions to flow through you, but don't allow them to be pent up where you perceive reality only through the lenses of that particular emotion and you cultivate that lenses, and then out of nowhere all you see is that particular emotion. But I'm curious, what is your take on awareness itself?
I think it's one of those things that I think you have to learn it. I think it's definitely something that we need to be taught. We're not taught to be aware of what is going on around us, even things like just general spatial awareness. I mean, in today's world, if you're walking down a busy street, people are glued to their phones or they're looking at their feet or they're just genuinely not aware of you or what is going on around them. So many people are not aware of what is happening because it's almost like we've shrunk our world while we're expanding our reach, which kind of sounds totally contradictory, doesn't it? Because we can now get on our phones and watch the news in every country if
Hmm.
we choose to. We can connect to people all around the world, but yet we're confining ourselves to this tiny bit of space on our gadgets and on our screens. And when we're actually out in the real world, we're not aware of what's going on. So I think it's something that we need to practice. And I think it's something that all of us can definitely work on. I think it's a skill we have to learn. I really do.
I like this metaphor that while our bubble, the world goes smaller, our reach becomes bigger. It's kind of like
Mm,
this joke of duality that God is playing on us. I find it very funny. Like the
yeah,
last will be the first, and the first will be the last.
absolutely. Yeah.
What will be your tip for those that want to be aware? How can do that?
Start with you. I think you have to start with yourself and just the simplest things like waking up in the morning and just being aware of what am I feeling? How does it feel lying here on my bed? Just the awareness of, how is my body as I'm waking up? Have I got any pain in my head? How do my calf muscles and my ankles and my feet feel in the sheet? It's just start with something really, really little. And then you can start to expand on that. Connecting to your body is a really simple way of starting to be aware. And then asking yourself, questions like, what do I want to be able to do today? Right. And if you can ask yourself that question, then you go, okay, so if I want to be able to do that, what little steps do I need to take to make sure that I can? Okay. And that's where you can look for any obstacles. Awareness then comes in. Is there anything that could block me? What tools do I need to help me? That's awareness now of what you actually do need. And I think that it's the baby steps and there's the little questions that you start to ask yourself where you can start to be aware. And even that question, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? So that's what I would say. Start really, really small and start by asking questions.
I love that. Baby llama steps. You build brick by brick, beautiful
Yeah.
castle for your soul to live. High five. But now there is another tricky question.
What is meditation? This is a very good question. I would say it's different things to different people. So for me, I find that meditation is a place where I can go to and allow myself to just be. Now, that for me is going to be something different to what it is for other people. And it's different for me at different times. So sometimes it's just literally being in nature. And that can mean going to the local park and just being aware of what's around me, feeling the wind on my face, listening to the sound. It could be just that. Sometimes I can almost take myself into a meditative state when I sitting on a bike and just getting into the flow of the movement. So I think it's where I feel I'm in tune with both my thoughts and my feelings. But that's my take on it. And I'm not going to say that that is what everybody else finds from it. So what
Don't you
do
think
you
it's
mean by
funny?
meditation?
Yeah, I was about that. It's very funny because we're communicating with people and we define words differently. And then there are those clashes in communication. I would define meditation as a tool that is used for the growth of the spirit. But
Right.
as with all the tools, if the tool is using you, you're a dum dum and you should really think about it. I had a question that I literally just forgot.
I think when it
This
comes
summer.
the term spirituality, I think is something that I was quite new to. I only really discovered it when I got actually into rehab and went through the 12 steps of AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. And it talked then about spirituality. And then up until that point, and I was 35 by then, up until that point, I always used to think that spirituality was something to do with religion. And I think that that is something that I don't know whether that's something that you come across a lot with people when they first step into your world or whether they already kind of recognize that it's different. But for me, I really didn't understand the concept of spirituality not being aligned with a religion. And that was quite a great and exciting discovery for me because I came from a family where religion was a bone of contention. There were two different religions and that could cause all kinds of argument. And so my way of dealing with that was to just go, well, that's it. Religion's rubbish. All it does is cause fights, etc. And therefore, in my head, I thought that I wasn't spiritual, not realizing that they are completely different things. And I think, when you spoke about meditation being spiritual, I think for me, that concept was very difficult to even understand. When you talk about spirituality, what is it that you're meaning?
Ooh.
Turning the
People
table.
will hate that. People will hate that. What I've observed is that spirituality is a tool that people use just as they use food, drugs, alcohol to escape from reality.
Right.
And the most spiritual people compete who's the most delusional. So it's obviously not serving them. And actually, the best way for the spirit to grow is to face challenges in their life.
Right.
But if you run away from them, it's like raping your soul because the soul knows exactly what it wants to experience in its life. But you using the ego to go through life and to run away to yoga or meditation is forcing the soul, the spirit, to take a backseat on this journey while the ego laughs, the soul is crying.
No.
And it is very often, very often that I see this. And I wouldn't even define myself as a spiritual person. And yet I've meditated countless hours, at least 7,000. I do esoteric Tao. I went to Shaolin. I
Right.
went all of those crazy things. Yet when you compare that, it's but because people want things right here, right now, but they don't want to do the work. They want
Right.
magically things appear in them, to them, given by a Golden Llama, for example. And
Yeah.
maybe I grant wishes, but it's gonna happen next week, like a Santa Claus, Golden Santa, Golden Llama Cloud. I don't know. But the thing is, you need to work for it or identify what is blocking you. And usually people glorify the things that are blocking them, don't want to confront them. And once they confront them, and there are ways that you can confront them without confronting them, you let go of that energy, that belief, that thought, and you realize, whoa, I was looking for this all my life and it's right in front of me. Why didn't I see that? Because you had those lenses that allowed you to see only one thing and you somehow glorify that. But the reality is so big that there are countless lenses through which you can explore them. So is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? On this growth journey called life, we need to understand some things will serve us and some things will not serve us. It's about
Yeah.
identifying what is serving us and what is not serving us. I do speak a
Absolutely.
lot.
And I think
Which,
that brilliant way of you describing that. And I think when you're looking at whether it's food, alcohol, exercise, work, it doesn't matter what it is, we're looking at a way to get something, right? It's that instant gratification, isn't it? We want it now. We want an outcome. And we want that reward system to make us feel good. What we forget is it's only temporary. And we got to keep on looking for it because once we've had that reward, it's like, okay, and now what? The next thing and the next thing.
yes.
And this is where you've got to be in some way back to that awareness, aware of what you are actually doing. Until you can have that, you can't even recognize that there is a block. And often we kind of know that there's something, people, I don't know what it is, I just don't feel right. Right? There's just something missing. That is often what people say. And I'm guessing that you hear something similar. And then it's inviting them to try something different. And like you said, turning into it and not trying to either blot it out, run away from it, or just get that instant gratification that ultimately isn't going to in any way help you long term. It's probably going to harm you. But it takes a certain person and it takes, for a lot of people, certain circumstances to collide together. And I do believe that, I didn't end up in rehab because suddenly it seemed like a good idea. There was a collision of circumstances that happened out of my control that ensured that's where I ended up. And that was my journey. And I truly believe that because don't think I would have got there otherwise. And I wouldn't be here talking to you today if I hadn't.
Hmm.
But this is where you got to recognize that everybody's journey is different. And we can't force somebody to want to do things different until they feel that they want to do things different. But then it's pointing them in the direction, isn't it? So for people like you can say, right, these are amazing tools, and I can share with you how to utilize them. And you're potentially going to get these benefits from them. But also, it's not about, as you said, that instant gratification. It's about having a go. It's about repeating it. How many hours did you say you meditated? Right. And it's the work and all of those things people don't necessarily want to do.
Yes, I definitely agree. I don't encourage to be someone like me because I'm gonna face the music. I'm gonna see the demon that's hiding underneath the bed to realize that there's nothing to be afraid of. And I cherish those moments. But I understand that all flowers bloom in due time. You cannot force someone to do things because if you force a flower to bloom, you are a barbarian and God will punish you. why would you even want to do that? It's most likely your internal blockage because everything needs to be my way. I need to control
Yeah.
everything. And that is sign of fear. That is sign of weak kidneys. So it's easier to work on the kidneys. Transmute that energy into gentleness and stillness. And again, I'm talking too much. Where
No,
can people find you,
right.
Vicky?
Absolutely. Yeah. So you can find me on Facebook, Vicky Midwood, on LinkedIn, Vicky Midwood Health Coach, and on my website, which is just vickymidwood.com.
Amazing. All those links are under this video. Thank you for tuning in into another episode and stay tuned for the next one. Ciao.